This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Dr. Claude Anderson, I like to call him our fearless leader, the man with a plan. He's the only national leader, heads a think tank that is for blacks, by blacks, and this is what he does. And so you can get a chance to speak to Dr. Thornton, the PTA president, about the pipeline to from schools to prison complex. Dr. Anderson, is there such a pipeline, do you think, from your research? Have you found out that such a pipeline exists?
What pipeline is that, Carl? First of all, let me say good evening to you.
Good evening to you as well. The pipeline from schools to prison is calculated. They calculate how many students are going to flunk out of school, and therefore they start building these prison complexes for them.
Well, that's a very easy one, Carl. You don't necessarily have to have a pipeline to figure that out. You live in a society in which there's only three things that an individual could do to be self-sustaining and competitive in society. That's at three different levels. 1, 2, 3. The highest level is number 1. At the top, you either have a job with skills to properly equip you to be sustainable there. 2, you have a business up there. If you can't have a business and don't have a job, you must go down to level 2. Level 2 means you must go on some form of welfare or public assistance. And if a conservative group comes by and kicks you off or closes out all the programs, then you have no alternative to go down to level 3. Level 3 means you must steal. So every individual in our society, and especially blacks, must do one of three things: either sophistication, a combination, or elaboration of either working, going on welfare, or you steal. And the black folk right now live in a society where they have no businesses. They have less than 1/2 of the business in the United States. They have less than 1/2% of the wealth. They have no industries of any consequence. And when they're at the second level, all the welfare and the public assistance program cut out, then yes, you're going to go to jail. You're going to be criminalized. That's what a permanent underclass is. And that was put in effect way back in the 1968-69 by President Nixon, called benign neglect, which means cut out all these programs, shift the focus off of black folk, shift it to other groups, minority women and immigrants, to pretend that black folk don't exist. Benign neglect means make black folk become invisible in our society, use very broad, ambiguous terms like minorities, poor folk, people of color, multicultural, and diversity. So yes, there's a pipeline, but it's been set in place for years. And when you're debating issues, not worth debating. If you cannot build businesses and have a self-independent economy and a self-independent community where you can control the elements in your community, you're going to go to prison. You're going to be a permanent underclass of beggars and criminals.
Well, Doc, you said a few years back, well, you've been saying this for years, that 2013, that we would be a permanent underclass. Have we reached that stage yet?
Yes, you are now the official permanent underclass in America now. You're through. You got a very small window of opportunities, and I hate to say this to black folk, because I don't want to depress them, because there's a small window. If they can organize and do the kind of things we should be doing collectively as a team and as a group, we can still maybe get out of it. But it's getting very bad. And as you saw in Powernomics in Chapter 3, that I talked about, that also started in 2013, that in this century, that the issue won't be what Du Bois was talking about back in the 1920s about it being the color line. It's going to be the boundary lines, where people are going to be fighting for territory, for boundaries. That's the issue in Syria. That's the issue in Russia with Ukraine. That's the issue in Palestinians and the Arabs and Israel. They're fighting for territory. Everybody's fighting for territory but black folk. Black folk are not giving up all their territory. They're integrating. They're integrating, and all these major metropolitan cities are going to be gentrified, where whites can come back and young people come back and take over all the major cities where black folk used to be the dominant population. They're going to give up their territory. They're going to give up all their rights and all the assets in those areas. And so it's very hard to explain things to black folk. Most don't listen, and the ones do listen, they don't care.
So, but that gentrification is happening, as you mentioned, all over the country in all our urban centers. And is it being done voluntarily? Are we complicit in it, or is it by design?
It's a combination of both, but by design. Combination of both by design. As a matter of fact, Bloomberg began to bring up the idea of regentrifying the cities and gave it back to Obama way back about 5 or 6 years ago, and said, let's take all these major urban areas that are so depressed and economically downgraded, and rather than revitalize them. And what we'll do, we just simply bring in immigrants in this country and put them on a high-speed path to give them green cards to come in this country in massive numbers in an unending influx, and bring them right into these major urban areas, help them start businesses and industries, and then as they begin to grow and build an economy, maybe they'll be interested in giving black people some jobs.
You mentioned that before. You mentioned that before, and you said that Baltimore was one of the cities that was actually doing that.
Well, yeah, no, that's not the only one that's doing it. They're doing it all over the country, Carl. Started out, New York has been working on it. Washington, D.C. used to be known as Chocolate City. When I came here with President Carter back in 1976, at that point in time, Washington, D.C. was known as Chocolate City. About 78% of the population was black. It's down into the mid-40s now. You got Detroit, Michigan. That's undergoing. The governor just came out 3 weeks ago and says, let's now revitalize the city of Detroit because we're going to gentrify it. And see, there's about 5 things they do to take over these cities, and to take over the wealth and the territory. They take it over, not necessarily by force. They take it over because black folk give it to them. We're the only person trying to integrate. You haven't seen the American Indians marching on Washington, D.C. to integrate. You haven't seen any Koreans or Chinese or Arabs or Hispanics marching to Washington to integrate. The only people who want to integrate is black folk. You're giving up all your rights. In Detroit, Michigan, the same thing. And so that's why the governor came out. So let's bring in all these immigrants into Detroit, Michigan, which used to be primarily a 90% black city. And now blacks are going to be a permanent underclass, get buried alive underneath them. And before they
hang on, Doc, because we've got to take a break. I'll let you finish up on that on the other side. And tell us why is this thirst for integration? Is it part of our DNA? Because as you mentioned, the other ethnic groups are not, do not seem to want integration. Folks, number to call, speak to Dr. Claude Anderson from Powernomics. Is 800-450-7876. That's 800-450-7876. Take your calls in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
And thank you for staying with us. And the man with the plan, Dr. Claude Anderson. Number to call, speak to him is 800-450-7876. That's 800-450-7876. Or you can reach me on Facebook and Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. And you can also like us on Facebook. Dr. Anderson, I'm going to let you finish up what you were saying before the break. You're saying that 2013 we're going to be a permanent underclass and because of integration. So my question was, what was it that I guess our leaders saw in integration that you mentioned no other ethnic group wants to integrate but us? Why?
Well, the mere fact is that when Nixon came into office in 1968, one of the first things he did was make a promise and a commitment to the majority of society, and particularly the conservative elements in the society, that he would put an end to the whole civil rights movement and the black power movement in this country. And Monahan at that time, Daniel Monahan, sent a memo to him saying basically child policy called benign neglect. Benign neglect. In the Daniel Monahan memo, which says, take the focus off of black folk and shift it to other groups, to women, children, and immigrants, and pretend that black folk don't exist. Make them invisible in the society. So public policies went out all over the country, basically saying, ignore black folk. Don't include them in anything of any substance and consequence. And based on a couple of Supreme Court rulings by 1978, they came to this whole concept called diversity. Diversity meant divert resources away from black folk and give it to other groups. And so at that time, all these other groups started popping up. Then the women's movement jumped up and started moving forward. And some of it also, and the initial emphasis also came from the Kennedy administration that suggested that you had to take the whole civil rights movement and integrate it and bring in women and white youth and the unions into the fact to dilute it and water it down. Integration is a watering down process. It's a dilution process. And somehow, I don't know why my leaders and my friends in the politics don't understand that. You cannot strengthen anything and make it stronger by integrating it. You don't integrate. You put water in the gasoline. You're not making the gasoline any more powerful, more potent. You're watering it down. And what integration and social integration has done for black folk, Carl, it just simply made them a guest. It made them a guest in what other people own and control in a competitive society. You're living in a society called America. It is a capitalistic-based society, which means you're working to compete with other groups. Nobody's coming to America to get along with you, to be your friend, your partner, the people of color. They come in here to compete and get as much as they can in terms of unearned benefits. And black folk don't seem to understand that, so while they have to busy integrating, these other groups are going to come in. They're going to take over all these major urban cities, and they're going to dominate them. And that's why from New York to Washington, D.C., no longer a chocolate city. And then Detroit, Michigan, going to go down in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Gary, Indiana, Los Angeles is going already. And in Florida, South Florida, where you are, at one time, we had a lot of major black areas down there. You had Overtowns, you had Liberty City, you had Coconut Grove. Those things have been integrated out of existence.
So what is the plan? Can this be reversed? What do we do? Move back to the inner cities?
Well, you have to see, the first thing black folks have to understand, it ain't about hating or disliking anybody. It's about competition. And somehow black folks think that if you're against integration, you hate somebody. It ain't about hating anybody. Everybody else is busy engaging in activities that take care of their own people. I don't ever blame whites for what they do. Whites did exactly what they're supposed to do. They take care of their people. So do the Indians and the Asians, the Chinese and the Arabs. They take care of their people. It's only our people, our black leadership, that totally ignored their own people. And back in when that public policy of benign neglect went into effect, and they're going to take the focus off of black folk, most of our black leadership at that time, particularly civil rights leaders, they gave into the realities of racism and say, well, if we're going to never be able to do anything for black folk anymore, we might as well start getting close to the white corporate dollars and start taking care of it and join with these other groups. And they began to sign agreements with them. They signed public agreements, those groups, to do nothing unless they included them with whatever they're going to do for black folk. When I was out in California, as you know, out in Inglewood, I went to the city council there to try to build a hotel for blacks over there in Inglewood. And two women, two Hispanic women and one white woman got up ahead of me before the city council said, Mr. Mayor, we're upset because Dr. Anderson would come here to do something for black folk and not including us. And the Martinez, the guy that sat on the city council, he said, Dr. Anderson, before you address that issue, that concern, you need to know in California, we've signed, the civil rights groups have signed agreements with us not to do anything without including Hispanics in it. And so now how are you going to react to that? Now, if you look at my business card, it doesn't say anything about integration, it doesn't say anything about civil rights. The only ism I'm into is Owism, blackism right now. I'm trying to support those people that nobody care about, that's totally indifferent. The ones that everybody's been told to ignore and forget that they don't exist. I fight for black folk, not because I hate anybody else. I come from a mixed family, but I'm still going to fight for black folk because nobody gives a darn. They have no leadership. They've been abandoned by their own people and moved into the social integration bit. And black folk had, Carl, they had more in the 1950s than they got today. Black folk used to have communities. They used to own and control resources, communities, churches, buildings, schools. They had laundries and mats. They had their own hotels and railroad systems. They had bus lines, cab companies, and theaters. They own nothing now because integration took it all from them. Integration will strip you down to nothing. You can't compete. That's why you're a permanent underclass.
Well, Doc, quickly, Earl just tweeted, he got a question for you. He says he wants to know more details about these so-called deals that you mentioned that our civil rights leaders have signed with other groups.
Well, I'll let pull up some of the papers, but you go check with groups like the Council of La Raza, Council of LULAC, check with the Mexican Defense League, check with the National Hispanic Party, those groups, okay?
This is actually a document that's signed by our...
They've agreed. The leaders have agreed. That's why you're not going to find any black leaders with any notoriety in this society that would stand up and identifiably speak for something that would benefit strictly and solely black folk. What they want to do now is pretend that somehow that black folk are no different from any other group in this country. That our experience as black folk in America is just identical to any Hispanic that ran across the border last night. That there's no difference between a Hispanic, an Arab, an Indian, anybody else in this country. They've all been treated the same. As a matter of fact, they want you to believe there's no difference between a gay and a black person. But black people have a very unique history in this country, a very specialness. They have a special relationship with this country that's been going on for 500 years. They have problems that are uniquely their own, that does not relate to any other group. And yet nobody wants to address those issues. That's why you got major problems in this country, never going to resolve them. Because nobody wants to look at the problems of black folk. And integration took our people the wrong way. The problem was when the integration came about, was that they never looked down the road and said, what was the real problem for black folk doing slave and Jim Crow segregation? It was a maldistribution of all the wealth, resource, privileges, and controls of all levels of government in the society into the hands of the dominant white society. Black folk owned 1/2 of anything of value. Here you are 140 years later, you still own 1/2 of anything in value. You don't own or control anything. You can't employ your own people. You don't even control your school system. I heard y'all talking about a few minutes ago. You're going to control them because they're no longer within your communities. You're now putting these black kids on buses and send them all to some other people's neighborhoods, into their schools. And I'll tell you about them. You talk about education. I'm the only black that's ever over the entire educational system for a state from 1970 to 1976 with this whole concept of charter schools and public and religious schools and religious academies cropped up. and because these individuals are trying to avoid integration. That's why they created those schools, to bust the public school system that was initially put in place in the 1860s to begin to educate all these black kids coming out of slavery with their parents.
800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. Anderson. Let's go to line 1. Fred's in D.C. Fred, you're on with Dr. Anderson.
Good evening to both of you. Dr. Anderson, I always love hearing you. Everything you say I agree with. Let me ask you a question.
You're a good man. I love you.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Before integration, when we owned businesses, when our community was more cohesive and we had so much going on, we owned land and everything, how much did we rely on politics?
At that time, very little. Yes, as a matter of fact, if you would go back to 1920 as an example, at that time, in comparative terms with 100,000 people, black people had 20 times more businesses in 1920 than you got today. But when the Great Depression came along, and it wiped out most of the business in the United States, it wiped out black businesses too, destroyed a lot of them. But in 1920, we had bus companies, we had mattress companies, we had a shipyard in Baltimore, we had a railroad line in Jacksonville, Florida, another railroad line in Little Rock, Arkansas. We had our own bus companies in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, with over 500 buses. We had our own movie theater chains, 3 movie theater chains across America, the Lincoln and Lafayette theaters, and so on. I'm telling you. And but what happened was that when the economy went down, and they started recovering in the late 1930s, you got 3 groups that got upset because they felt that we had too much blackness at that particular time. W.B. Du Bois, starting about 1915, was pushing black politics. Marcus Garvey at that time was pushing black economics. Carter G. Woodson was pushing black education and black culture. Elijah Muhammad started pushing black religion. And the black artists and entertainers were pushing the Renaissance group and black culture and the art and entertainment. But by the late 1930s, the triad got together. That was your black ministers, your black civil rights leaders, and your black newspapers. They said there's too much blackness. And rather than rebuilding in the 1930s, rebuilding all these businesses and industries and stuff we had, they said let's just stay out of it now and let other people come in our community and build businesses. And they say, well, we're going to do it
right there, Doc, because we're going to take a break. And also, when you come back and when you answer the question about the Harlem Renaissance, because some people have said that was designed to kill the Back to Africa movement by Marcus Garvey, and also to kill the black nationalist thrust that was going on at that same time. 800-450-7876, number to call. Speak to our guest, the man with the plan, Dr. Claude Anderson, the only one who's in charge of a think tank that is for blacks, by blacks, and in this country. Again, that number is 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
And thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest, Dr. Claude Anderson, the man with the plan. By the way, it's election day in the district. As we talked about earlier, so far the turnout has been very low. We'll talk about that. If you're having problems against the polls, please let us know. We'll probably talk about that tomorrow. But so far, seems not a lot of people bothered to vote. 800-450-7876, number where you can vote right now to speak to Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Anderson, I'm going to let you finish up what you were saying before the break.
Yeah, let's see, Carl. I was talking about what happened in the late 1930s. And see, after blacks had lost a lot of their investments because of the Great Depression, a lot of them were totally unwilling by the end of the 1930s, they're unwilling to go back and rebuild all these businesses again. They felt it might be better under the persuasion of our triad, our black leadership at that time, to just open up our community at that time, let other people come in and establish businesses and just give us jobs. And some of the Jewish people were very effective in doing this. They came in and said, we'll help you. What is it you want? And at that time, the leadership started pushing for social integration. And the Jews at that time were coming into the country in the early 1900s. They were looking for money and businesses to start. And so they said, well, we'll join with you all and help you start these businesses if you just support us and what we want to get in the country. So let us come in your community. So Jews went into most of these communities, set up these businesses, and they did very well. And they pushed for blacks into socialism, trying to get social integration. And but by the early 1940s, to make a long story short, at that time, universality which means get along with all people and don't be focused on your own selves first. It became social integration at that point. And when they started becoming social integration in the 1940s, the Jews and blacks became very effective in trying to push for social integration. But the other groups in the society, they felt that was a threat to them, and they began to get rid of integration. All the Polish communities and Irish communities, they began to come together. Said, we have to band together. If these blacks are going to come in and penetrate us, let's band back together. So all the ethnic white communities started disappearing, and so they could come together and aggregate and just be one large white community, while black folks was trying to integrate. And the first thing they tried to integrate was the baseball teams. Jackie Robinson, they said, Brooke Rickey said, if I can get this one black baseball player to play with the Brooklyn Dodgers, we don't need all the rest of these black teams. We had two black leagues, black baseball leagues at that time, with about 450-some baseball players. They were like the best in the world, couldn't beat them. But they got rid of all the teams and all those black players just to put one black boy on the Brooklyn Dodgers team. The same thing happened with basketball. Blacks are the best basketball players. They couldn't beat them. But yet they took a few of those and put them on the white teams and let the rest of them go and converted some of them over with Abe Saperstein and called the Harlem Globetrotters. Then they went to the black universities and did the same thing. They said, if we can just get one black kid to go to a white university, we'll get rid of our schools, our black colleges, and run the money into those schools. Now, see, no other people would do that. Catholics would not give up Catholic University or Notre Dame just so Catholics can go sit in a Protestant school. Jewish would not give up Brandeis University just so they can go sit in a Catholic school. Only black folks say, we let our colleges and universities go down under integration if we just get our kids to go to a white school. And so everything began to fall apart, all the way up through the civil rights movement, to make a long story short.
So why is that, though? Because you mentioned, it seems like our leaders are leading us down this integration path. Yet now you have Latinos or Hispanics, whatever the PC term to use for that group. And yet, are they on the onslaught like we were now, or are they just being left alone and everybody's picking on us?
No, they're going to always go after the weakest link in the chain. And see, nobody's going to come to rescue you. You have never seen, and I doubt it's highly unlikely you will ever see any marches. You will never see American Indians coming off the reservation. You ever see any American Indians trying to integrate? They're not going to come off the reservation, go and say, we're going to march on Washington to help poor black folk, to do this for black folk. Koreans not come out, and the Asians not come out in the streets and say, we're going to come out here and forget and ignore our needs and go out here and fight for black folk. Nobody's going to do that. You haven't seen a march by women ever do anything for black folk. The women issue only crops up every time there's some demand for something for black folk. The same thing that happened during the Reconstruction period, when they tried to give black folk the right to vote with the 15th Amendment. The women's movement jumped up and said, you can't give it to the blacks until you give it to us. And that same thing happened in the 1960s when black folk were trying to get some additional civil rights benefits. And a senator from Louisiana and a congressman from Virginia says, before you give black folk all those rights, we got to take care of the white woman. They turned around and put in Title IX. Title IX was to divert the resources away from black folk. I did a survey in Florida when I was over education for the state of Florida during those years to find out what happened to the desegregation funds that's been coming to Florida. I surveyed 67 counties, county systems to find out what happened to the monies. And out of all the desegregation funds that were coming down, being directed towards blacks in the state of Florida during the desegregation period, the money went to Title. All of them said we'd rather spend our money on Title IX for women than spend it on black people. And black folk have never gotten the message. And that's why they're going to turn around and destroy their own schools, send their kids to school, to charter schools and all other kind of schools and religious schools, rather than maintain the public schools in their own communities. And the charter schools want that money because there's $108 billion floating around at that particular time about 4 years ago in black community just for public education for black kids. They're after those monies.
Well, explain to us, because I understand that you were the first person to address the affirmative action issue. Explain to us how that came about.
Well, I wasn't the first person. Other people talked about it earlier. Johnson brought it up, and during the Kennedy administration, and Jackson brought it up he was talking about the Philadelphia plan. But for a comprehensive plan, I wrote the first one in 1970 and 71 for the state of Florida, and got it approved by the governor and the state cabinet to be across the board to try to elevate black folk. I didn't write affirmative action for minorities and poor folk and women and couples and midgets and short people and tall people and skinny people and immigrants. I wrote it to be corrective action. So affirmative action means corrective action. Correcting something that the government has systematically, conscientiously, and done over historical times to impede, to exploit, to misuse, to abuse, or to shortchange and handicap a specific group of people. See, all these groups now you see running around call themselves minorities. And in the affirmative action program, there's no legitimate reason for any of these groups to be in it. There's no legal grounds, but there's no constitutional grounds for them to be getting preferential treatment. There's no preferential treatment grounds or evidence for Hispanics, all these other groups, Eskimos, and Filipinos, Samoans, or anybody coming into getting in these programs, or women. Women are not a minority; they're majority. And now they're going to put gays and transsexuals into the program. The affirmative action program has been totally destroyed from what I started out with back in the 1970s. And what I tell black folk now, they say, what do you think about affirmative action? Basically, it means to die. The best way to kill off affirmative action now is for black folk to pull out of it and say, I don't want to be a part of it anymore. Withdraw from it, it'll collapse because there's no justifiable reason for all these groups to be getting special preferential treatment. The government's never done anything to them. And once it collapses, then black folks should go for reparations for things that are uniquely pertaining to the historical treatment of blacks in this country.
All right, I guess this is the man with the plan, Dr. Claude Anderson. His books, White Labor, Black Wealth. Was it Black Labor, White Wealth?
No, you work and didn't get any pay. That's what it was. But the issue is called, to answer your question, I skipped that. The issue in this country never without civil rights, and I hope some of them hear me today, it should never have been integration. That's where they were wrong. It never should have been a question of integration. Nor is it a question of segregation. And our blacks always thought, well, if we give up integration, we're going back to segregation. Wrong. It has nothing to do with that. As a matter of fact, a white guy asked me down in Tallahassee, Florida, back in the 70s, said, Dr. Anderson, he said, you're confusing me. What do you guys want? Malcolm X is talking about segregation, separation, and Martin Luther King is talking about aggregation. Which end of the stick do you all want? I said, I don't want either end of the stick. I said, you don't ask any other group in this country which end of the stick they want. I don't want segregation. I don't want integration. I want aggregation, which means that black folks should have the same rights and privileges of any other group in this country to come together any point in time, any place, any city, anywhere with their own people and pool their resources, match their resources to make themselves more self-sustaining, self-sufficient, and competitive in a capitalist society. It ain't about integration and segregation. It's about aggregation, pooling yourself with your own people, respecting them and helping them.
800-450-7876. Mrs. Richardson in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Do you have a question for Dr. Anderson?
Yes, dear, I do. I have 3 questions, Carl, and I know Carl always wants me to ask these questions and don't go on the soapbox. I'm going to do it today. Number 1 question, Doctor, do you believe that the way that this white supremacy and the white structure, 1/10 of what's supposed to be the world's population, controlling the 9/10 of the planet. In this country, let's get back to this country. I don't want to go address like Carl said, but I'm saying, do you believe that they're trying to totally control our group, just the African American group? Like you're saying, all those others are looked at special. They get preferential treatment, even the Cubans and the Hispanics. And number 2, do you believe they want to always keep this stereotype going? And with black help, in other words, there are artists out there and entertainers who are helping them. Either they're ignorant or they don't know or what they're doing because of the money or what is it. But do you believe that there's a combination of participation in it, black artists along with the corporations that's going hand in hand to bring us nothing but filth? Because everything you see on television, you see black stereotype images of nothing but crime and thugs.
Well, hang on, Mr. Richardson, because we've got to take another break here for traffic. I'll let you get your last question on the other side. And
all right,
let Doc respond. Folks, you can join the conversation with Dr. Claude Anderson, 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
And thank you for staying with us and our guest, Dr. Claude Anderson, the man with the plan. And let's go back to Mrs. Richardson in Chevy Chase. So Mrs. Richardson, can you do your last question for Doc?
Yes, thank you so much. And Dr. Claude Anderson, you are right. We are the people. You're the man with the plan. And if we didn't have you, I don't know. All these other greats are great, but I just think we'd be talking and going around in circles. You're the one at least getting the whole message about economic self-help and things like that. Really, you're the only one doing that. So you're really the man with the true plan. But let me just say this. I told my son some of them, And they're saying a lot of these places were supplied from this idiot country here, this criminal government in America, that they aided a lot of these other countries even a couple of 100 years back. Like when they was making guns and machinery and all that in England or whatever they did, that they helped supply Spain, they helped to supply Asia to fight them back and everything with the bombs. So I want to know your perspective, because my perspective is they never wanted African people to have those things because they know they couldn't control them. So what is your belief? Because I believe, like you're saying, they're controlling black folk to the hilt, that they're controlling, and that's their plan until hundreds of years. Unless we wake up, they'll do it another 1,000 years. That's the plan. And God bless you, and I love you both.
Thanks, Mr. Richardson. Doctor, member questions?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And tell her thanks. I deeply appreciate her comments and her support, and I'll take it to heart. And anything I can do to help my people, I've devoted most of my life to doing it anyway. And I don't want anybody to hurt anybody else. And I love and respect all other people, but I'm just totally committed to my own people right now. And in terms of what she's asking about what's happening, you have to, in this country, black folk make up about approximately 12.5% of the population of society. And globally, I guess black people make up something like about 24 to 25% of the population. In both perspectives, whether it's domestic or international, black folk are a much-needed group. You're needed to be consumers. And you live in a dog-eat-dog society. You get a feeding chain. And those at the bottom or at the top feed off of those others. Everybody else around the world is feeding off of Africa, and they're feeding off of blacks in this country. Every group that comes to America, the first thing they want to do is go to a black community because that's where the vacuum and the voids are. They know that in this black community there's no political leadership in there. They know that you got all kind of vacant land because blacks don't own and control none of the land. They're busy integrating and moving away. They know that there's no businesses there. They can go into any black community, establish business, and get rich within about 1 year time just off of black folks' dollars. Why? Because black folk have a total spendable income, almost $1 trillion, and they spend 98% of it outside their own communities in other people's businesses. They only spend less than 2% in their own communities, and that doesn't even go to blacks. We don't practice group economics and group politics. So consequently, everybody needs black folk. And if I were whites or one of these other groups, I wouldn't want black folks to change either. They need black folk. They need you because they need your dollars, your money. They need you as consumers, just like doing slavery. Slavery could not have worked if you didn't have blacks there to use it, to be able to be users of the materials. They needed blacks. The companies that sold sandals and bro gangs of blacks. They had 200 companies that made nothing but shoes and wear for slaves. They had a thing called nigger cloths. They made clothing for blacks, rough clothing for blacks. All those, you got almost 5 million blacks that had some clothing and uniforms and shoes. They knew they had chains and whips and all. The industry functioned off of black folk. It always had. And seeing everybody practice capitalism in this society except black folk. Black people in this country are the only people that always want to practice socialism. It's social. Everything wants to be social. Capitalism, they never understood what capitalism is. Capitalism came into existence because of slavery in about 1509. Capitalism means go in and owning and controlling the land, the tools, and the resources, and using other people's labor to enrich yourself. Now, here black folk, they're running around here looking for jobs when everybody's going to use them to make money. And then Du Bois defined capitalism in 1915 in a similar fashion. He says capitalism is like owning 3 years of corn. You eat, save, sell, and you save the seeds for next year harvesting. And black folk are not eating, but they're eating, but they're not saving, they're not selling, they're not producing anything. We produce absolutely nothing. All we do is consume. We're zero producers and the 100% consumers. We can't take care of ourselves. There are 4 things that are essentially for us to be able to stay alive and survive. And you're talking about how they all beating up on you. Yes, they're going to beat up on you. You're weak. We're weak people. 4 things we have to absolutely be controlling in our own communities, have our own communities. We should at least be able to have some control over water, over food, over medicine, and over energy. And we don't even control any of those things. We're now depending on other people who are competing against you to keep you alive. So when anthrax or blue-blind plague or some other kind of disease or terrorism comes to a black community in America, you got troubles. Nobody's going to come look and rescue you. And all of our leaders on TV and on the radio talking about everything about what's going to go on in Syria, what's going to go on in Russia, and all these talking black heads. They should be talking about what's going on in black communities all across America. They won't do it. They're getting paid not to do it. And black folks should be understanding if you don't get these things, other groups are preparing to deal with the rough aspects. Who's come out to the black community and alerted them to what they should do in time of a disaster? Who's organized in the black area and the black community? It's because we don't have any community. All we got are neighborhoods. And neighborhoods are where you eat and sleep. We have not got one single solitary black community in America. We have no black leadership. We have no businesses, no industries. We have nothing. And see, that frightens me. And I love black folk, but they got to turn around and wake up real fast and quit listening to what a lot of these civil rights leaders and these talking heads and politicians are telling them. I don't care whether it comes out of a black mouth or a white mouth. Anybody that tells you that black folk are progressing, that America is lying to you.
Well, she mentioned stereotypes. That some of our leaders are complicit with this, with the pushing the stereotype of us.
Oh yes, what they're going to? Yes, they're going to do that. Why shouldn't they, Carl? They should do it. You know why they should do it? Because you got no way of countering. You got approximately 12,000 radio stations in the United States. Black folk own about 70 or 80 of them at most. You don't own any. You don't have any media. So how are you gonna counter with somebody put out negative images of you and put blacks on TV with diamonds in their lips and hats on backwards and tattoos all over their face? What are you gonna do? You can't counter any of it. Wearing their pants hanging off the back, you can't counter it. You don't have the radio. You don't have the markets for it. Out of 12,000 radio stations, you own, like I say, 70 or 80 of them. Out of 12,000 cable systems, you don't own any of them, not one of them. Out of 5,000 daily newspapers, you don't own not one daily newspaper. Out of 5,000 TV stations, you don't own not one. What in the world are you going to do? All you're going to do is watch all these black folk on TV that she's talking about, and I'm proud of her for pointing it out. They're going to be playing with a ball, playing with a basketball, tennis ball, golf ball, football, running, singing, dancing, telling jokes, pretending they're having a ball. And while all these other things are going down against black folk in this country, I must get at least 50 to 100 phone calls a day for blacks in this country and around the world saying, Dr. Anderson, please help us. We're going down. I said, well, we are, but I don't have the resources to help you. But I am planning some things that might be helpful to blacks by the end of this year, next year. And that's why I want to tell them, go read those books. And they can get into my books by calling. Let me tell you how to get them. You ready, Carl?
Go ahead.
They can either go to the Powernomics, www.powernomics.com, and order the books off the website, or they can go to the in the Barnes & Noble store or black bookstores, or they can call the corporate office. Call the corporate office at this number and order. We got a power pack right now. All the things I'm telling you about right now in those books. And they show you exactly. There are plans that show you how to learn how to compete and survive. Not to hate anybody, but just learn how to compete and practice capitalism. And here's the way it goes. Call 301-564-6075. Again, call at the Powernomics Corporation. That's 301-564-6075. And order it. You know, if you can't get it off the website, call that number and get the books. But you can go to the Powernomics website and order them right off the line and get a power pack to get all 4 books. That's Black Labor, White Wealth, Powernomics, the National Plan to Empower Black Americans, Dirty Little Secrets, and More Dirty Little Secrets. Get all 4 of those books on a special now for $70.
All right, 800-450-7876. We'll give that number out again later on. Let's go to line 1. Darren's in D.C. Darren, you're on with Dr. Anderson.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Oh, no, this is James.
James, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How you doing today? I just have a question. Has anyone, I guess, civil rights leaders or black organizations, has anyone ever told you why they shoot for integration so much and try to help other groups when other groups don't try to help African Americans? Because it seems like we always breaking our neck to help them, and on the flip side, they just do what they need to do to help their community. And it seems like, and I don't know if the civil rights organizations ever think about this, or black organizations, but it seems like we're going to always be in this state. We're going to always be at the bottom. We're going to always be begging. So I just want to know, has anyone ever talked to you on why we tend to do things the way we do? Always trying to help others when others are not trying to help us. And then we always look at ourselves and wonder why we always at the bottom. Other people have just come over here and they striving towards the top.
All right, that's an excellent question, but we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'll let Dr. Anderson respond to your question. James, thanks for your phone call. Folks, you too can join the conversation with Dr. Claude Anderson. It's real simple. It's 800-450-7876. That's 800-450-7876, or you can reach out to me on Facebook and on Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. You got a question for Dr. Anderson. If you're online, we will get to you. And also, you can like us on Facebook as well at carlnelsonshow.com. We'll take your calls for Dr. Anderson in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Welcome Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
Thank you for just joining us, folks. Our guest is Dr. Claude Anderson. We call him the man with a plan. He's the only leader that we have out there that has a plan that's solely for the benefit of blacks. And I might as well reiterate what he's been saying all along. It doesn't mean that you hate anybody else. It's just a plan that's just for blacks, because it seems like the rest of our leaders are all under the illusion of inclusion. I'm going to let Dr. Anderson respond to James's question, and then we'll take some more calls for him. Dr. Anderson?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Carl. The first thing, let me say, there are a couple of reasons why that occurs. You know, why your leadership doesn't take up the cause of their own people. Part of it comes from the fact that religious teaching, which is only a small part, but back in the early 1800s, like about 1808, that time when the evangelical movement moved through the United States, and black people were permitted to start having some kind of religious indoctrination and familiarity. But whites chose the pastors and told them, all the ministers, that if you're going to hold religious sermons for black slaves, and we're going to be there to monitor it, but there's only three things you must teach them. You must use the Bible to encourage them to do three things. One, to understand that when the Bible talks about the master and the slave, they talk about the white man on the earth and the black slave on the earth. Two, they must teach them that they must be humble and obedient. And three, you got to teach them to be hardworking. And four, teach them that they must look for pie in the sky after death. And that way they always look for fairness and equality. And see, if anybody, on the other hand, understands that you live in a capitalist society such as ours, the last thing you should ever be looking for, even though it comes out of the mouth of every politician and civil rights leader here, always talking about fairness, equal opportunity, and equality. You can't have that. You live in a competitive society. You cannot have equalness in a competitive society. That's like if I have a bicycle race, and racism is a competitive sport where people competing to get their hands on resources. The first one to get there first gets the mostest. That's what racism is. You're in a contest, a race. You don't get into a race to look for equality. The whole point of a race is to separate winners from losers. If you want to be equal, don't get in the race. Stay out of the race. If you get in the race that we're in now, and don't look for fairness. You got to learn how to compete and survive. And black folk have been religiously indoctrinated to try to be told to hang themselves on the cross and be like Jesus Christ. And what they should be saying is that, hey, Jesus Christ been there, he's done that. Blacks don't have to hang themselves on the cross. They shouldn't have to do it. Jesus has already done that. Second thing is that the failing is that our politicians don't let get away, is that they then allow themselves to be bought off, incorporated by the political structure itself and by major dominant groups. They buy them. They buy the black votes in this country, buy up the black elected officials, because we don't have an economic base in our black communities. We can't subsidize in the political movements. So consequently, those who can, they buy your leadership from you. And that's, for instance, in the 1866 Indian Treaty that we have lawsuits right now in the courts, in the Sixth Circuit Court, in the Federal Claims Court, and in the appeals courts, that's showing blacks in this country that Indians owned as many slaves as whites did. And in those 1866 Indian treaties, black folk were entitled to equal benefits as any so-called white Indian gets in America in all respects. And yet they've not, in 140 years, they've been denying them to black folk. And in our federal courts and our federal government has yet to enforce the treaties that they are mandated by law. Treaty is a law. They enforce it only for the white Indians, never for the black Indians and the black freedmen. So we have a lawsuit asking them to enforce it. So what do the Indians now have to do? They then take their monies and they go buy off the black politicians to fight against our treaty efforts in this country for black folk. And black folk don't understand that in the 1866 treaties, if the government had carried out the mandates, black folk, first of all, should have been freed from all those Indians that were holding all those slaves. The Chickasaw and the Choctaw was holding 12,000, 15,000 blacks as slaves, and that was in 1866, 2 years after the Civil War ended. And the government says, turn all those black slaves loose. And they were holding about 100,000 black slaves in the country. Turn them loose and give each one of them $150 in money. And the government gave them the money to give it to them. Give them each 160 acres of land. Give them rights to any resources on the reservation. Let them also be tax exempt. Also let them go to any school they want to go to on the reservation. Let them have access to all the resources on the reservation. And lastly, also give them a chance to come to the government and get any contracts free, and money and resources out of the Federal Indian Bureau. And lastly, like these black Indians that we get our treaty through should also be able to build, black freedmen should be able to build casinos just like the Indians. But the Indians took that casino money, and they've been buying up all the black politicians up on the hill. Even in the black congressional caucus, they come out and run and hide in the bathrooms. We go up the hill to fight for black folk. So if the other people buy your politicians, and the religious leaders have also over-indoctrinated black folk to always be looking for equality, equalness, and fairness. Nobody else is playing fair. They're playing to win.
All right, 800-450-7876. You're going to hold, get your questions ready, and please make them short because a lot of people got questions for Dr. Anderson. Let's start with line 4. Lawrence is in Arlington, Texas. Lawrence, you're on with Dr. Anderson. Is Lawrence there with us? Okay.
I think Lawrence hung up on you.
Let's go to line 3 then. David's in D.C. David, you're on with Dr. Anderson.
Hey, Dr. Anderson, how you doing? How you doing, Nelson? I appreciate you, brothers. I work at a school. I wanted to know, is there a book? I got your number. I got the Power Pack information and all that. I work with mostly elementary and middle school students. I want to be able to plant some seeds that these young brothers, that when they come up, they'll have something. And maybe, something just sprout from it. Myself, I'm 52. I'm just learning, man. And there's just so much, a wealth of information, and I'm so thirsty for it. I just find myself going and going. But I know that, and I challenge any listener, one of the things that we can do is do something right where we are. And so I have taken on that challenge myself. And I challenge any other listeners and any other male, mainly male, we got to start standing up in our community and everything. So my question to you is there a book that I can read, that I can facilitate to some young students that can, carry them on into the history? Because right now in school, I'm telling you, they're still teaching Christopher Columbus and a whole bunch of other crazy stuff, man. And it's just amazing to me that we don't have black history in our schools that our students go to. That's one. And the other thing is that it's a lot of medicating of our kids going on. So at the same time, is it something that you can direct me to in terms of dealing with kids that they label ED, but I think it's just us, and we just need to have some other activity or some more love. Somebody taking enough to love us through. And so I don't know if I'm making sense to you.
Yes, you are. Let me ask you a question very quickly. Which books did you read so far?
I haven't read nothing but
Well, that's understandable. That's okay. But see, the books that you're ordering, that Power Pack, well, every question you ask me is in those books. They're roadmaps, they're recipes, they're cookbooks, they're prescriptions that take you from the front to the back, show you exactly everything you should be doing and answer all those questions in the full, honest way as possible based on facts and what you should be doing. And so those books will be very helpful to you in terms of ED. And see, I was a persistent principal in school for ED way back in Detroit, Michigan, for a school for delinquent boys. I had 900 of the worst boys in the city of Detroit. And I created one of the best schools in the city of Detroit by teaching the kids that they were something special. And for instance, kids would come to school, never had food in the morning. I set up a breakfast program and had a Great Lakes Insurance Company and a couple other companies that provide food. I fed them so they come to school. They would come to school hungry, no food, eating potato chips and soda pops. They never had dental service. I had a couple of dentists in the neighborhoods that provide free dental care. But the problem now is that now that you don't have a community, you've been socially integrated, you don't have anybody you can turn to. All you got are vacant lots and weeds growing in fields. Because now you're abandoning your neighborhoods, so you got to go back and rebuild these communities. That's what these books are about, saying you got to build a healthy, strong, competitive community, because a community is where you store your wealth, your power, your resources, your privileges, your job opportunities, and a good, relevant education for your children. You can't get it going to another school pretending there's no difference between a white child and a black child. And when a teacher told me that down in Tampa once, back in 1974 or 75, she said, Dr. I don't see any difference between a black child and a black child and a white child. Then you need to be fired. There are a difference. They come in here with different problems, different resolutions, different baggage. You got to treat them like an individual. They got different problems. Deal with it. Don't quit trying to ignore it, pretend you don't see it.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks for your call. We'll keep moving. Let's go to line 1. Let's go to Ruth, also in D.C. Ruth, you're on with Dr. Claude Anderson.
Well, good evening to both of you, and thank you for taking my call. I just have to say to your guest, Brother Anderson, Dr. Anderson, I tell you, he has me laughing, because there are so many things that he is really telling the truth about. And one of the things that I really like, the way he is bringing out this information, is that you can tell that he doesn't have any bitterness in his heart against anyone. He's just telling it the truth like it is. And I just have 2 little short comments and one question to ask him, and I just say, may God bless her and continue to keep up this good work. But, you know, I had been saying this to people, too, and I said it on the show many times, that when we were segregated...
I'll tell you what, Ruth, hang on a sec, because we've got to take another break. I'll let you finish up with your question for Dr. Anderson on the other side.
Yes,
folks,
sir,
you can join our conversation with Dr. Claude Anderson, the man with a plan. 800-450-7876 is the number to call to reach him. And by the way, a lot of the stuff he mentioned is in his books. You need to read a lot of our so-called leaders. They've poached a lot of that stuff and trying to say it's their ideas, but they're actually from Dr. Claude Anderson. And when you read the books, you'll see what I'm talking about. Again, the number to call to reach him is 800-450-7876.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
Thank you for staying with us and our guest, Dr. Claude Anderson. Again, the number to call to speak to him, 800-450-7876. Go back to Ruth in D.C. Ruth, can you finish your question for Dr. Anderson?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to say this was a quick comment, too, that I can relate by experience to many of those true things that Dr. Anderson is saying, and there are some of the things that I'm not able to relate to. And one of the most important things that I know that I have said many times that he is saying that when they integrated so-called these schools and burst the black children out of their community, that is really what, like he said, started the downfall, because we need our community to be intact in order for us to go places. And back in the day when I came along, like he said, them blacks were on top of things. Those black baseball players, basketball players, and I mean everything. They're learning, they're getting this and doing that. But I credit that a lot too, because we kept God in the picture, and that he was at the forefront of everything we did. And when that stopped happening, that's when we start downfalling. That's what my question to him would be, do you believe that religion played a great role in this downfall of black people when they started integrating and, like you say, trying to control our religion and churches and everything about us? But if we keep God in that picture and pull together, like he said, and come together, we would get back on top and do things, and God would be well pleased. Thanks for taking my call, and you'll have a blessed and safe evening.
Thank you very much. Carl?
Yeah, do you want to respond, or you want to take another call?
No, I think she's absolutely right. You know, religion is extremely important for our spirituality. And the great irony of what she's saying is that if black folk had stayed with the original fact was that the religion, the first people on earth were black folk, and that Christianity started with black folk. The first Jews were black folk. People like Noah, Samson. Samson was a Danite. And Danites in the Bible, nowadays they're called Ethiopians. Samson was an Ethiopian, and Samson was Ethiopian. Noah was an Ethiopian. Moses was an Ethiopian. But nobody wants to go back and say, hey, those biblical individuals and personalities were black folk. If you move away from the blackness and you lose black folk. You got to go back and be honest enough and say, yes, black folk were the original Jews, and they were original Jews up until about the 700 or 800s A.D. And the religion should be based on that kind of a Christianism rather than what it is on now.
All right, 800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. Anderson. Line 5, we find Sandra in D.C. Sandra?
Hi, Carl and Dr. Anderson. Our black leaders, it seems like all they want to talk about is politics. I mean, I think if they focus more on economics, politics will take care of itself.
You're absolutely right. You get an A and move to the front of the room. Because they're absolutely right. You see, in economics, and see, people raise the question about legal issues. Legal issues, there is no such thing as a legal issue. Legal issues don't exist. What exist is economic issues. And if you got the economics, you control the legal issues. It's like a 5-story building. The first floor should always be economics. A 5-story building, the first thing you must always focus on is trying to build an economic base. That's the first thing all these people are enculturated in their society to do once they hit the United States. The first thing an Arab, an Asian, Hispanic will do, they're going to run and build them a business. So they're going to be selling something on the street corner with in a wagon or on a table or something. You build an economic base. And once you start building an economic base, you build, which is a community, a business community, in that business community, you put up your own businesses and your own industry so you can hire your own children. So your children won't have to leave your neighborhood and clean up and go out to somebody else's neighborhood, go store to store begging for a job. Nobody wants those kids out in their neighborhood. It's our responsibility to educate our own kids and to create jobs for our own children. So you must have an economic base to take care of your employment and your educational needs. Then you go to the second floor. You take that money you make on the second floor and you move to on the first floor, you move to the second floor. The second floor is politics. You make enough money in your economy, in your business and industries to control the second floor. The second floor is politicians. You take your money on the first floor and you buy every politician on the second floor. If you can't buy them, you rent or lease them as long as you need them. Then you require they do what all these, like the Koch brothers do and all these other rich people in the United States do in the elections. Then you take that money after you buy the politician, then you make him go to the third floor. The third floor is your court system and your law enforcement, and tell them to stop shooting black kids all the time, beating up on black kids and beating up on black people with a club and a badge. It's the politics that controls that, but the money at the bottom controls the politicians. The fourth floor is your media. And see that if you had the money, you would own some radio stations, cable systems, and newspapers, and you'd be able to counter all the stuff that Rush Limbaugh and all the rest of it. Bill O'Reilly put out all these negative things about black folk. If you don't control any media and you have no businesses at the bottom, you can't have any way of countering what people are saying is negative and bad about you in the media. And whites are not going to support any radio stations that talk about black needs and black interests. It's your responsibility to raise your own businesses, make your dollars revolve around 8 to 10 times, and build your own radio stations, cable system, and TV stations, and educate your own people and counter the Rush Limbaughs and the rest of them. And the fifth floor is education. Education is useless. Education is a toothless tiger. Educators can't do anything. Educators are only what you want them to be. But once you get your money, then you tell your educators what you want your kids to be. Tell them, instead of teaching my kids to play with balls and run with balls and golf balls and basketballs, I want them to learn how to produce and manufacture baseballs and basketballs and gloves and stuff. I want them to learn how to own stadiums and teams. You use your money to have the schools teach you what your children need, not what the white kids need, but what your children need.
You know, the black group that fought so hard for integration, they're the same group that come and complain about there's no black businesses.
That's right. Don't listen to them.
Isn't it?
Yeah, but see, you're smart enough to catch them and say, no, you go out and start building these businesses. We'll have some businesses.
Man, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Andre. All right, let's keep rolling, folks. 800-450-7876. Line 3 is Anthony, also in D.C. Anthony, you're on with Dr. Claude Anderson.
Yes, brother Carl, I love you, man. Dr. Anderson, down here in Virginia where I live, it's this restaurant that I was going to. I don't go anymore because 90% of the customers are black. 98% I can actually, that goes into this particular Korean restaurant. And they had ads in the papers that they needed help. And one Puerto Rican gentleman worked there. I know him, and he's a young guy. And he ran to me one day and quit on me. I said, what happened? He said, because I had a couple of my black friends come up there and apply for the job, and the guy left. He said, field, he wasn't going any hiring. And when they left, he hired a couple of young Asian gentlemen there over them. And me and him got into this argument because I told him all of his customers was black, but he don't want to hire any black people to work there. And then there was another restaurant that had ads in the paper. I saw young black men go up there all the time, nice school-going young black men. Okay, he wouldn't hire any of them. He did hire 2 young black females. They lasted about maybe 4 days. Went back up there probably about a week later. They was gone. And little Asian girl was in their spot. But I just know, Dr. Anderson, that most ethnic groups, I don't care if they're Hispanic, Asians, or whatever, they seem like they come together and they work against black folks.
They're in competition against you. They're not here to support. They're in competition. You're absolutely right. They're in competition against you. And they're going to hire their own people.
Right, that's what I tried to tell the gentleman, and he agreed with me. Because he said this. But anyway, I noticed in the Atlanta area, a lot of blacks are moving to the Atlanta area. It's becoming a haven now. They're moving down to that particular area for some reason. I don't know what it is, but a lot of them are migrating to California, other parts of the country, going right to that particular area. And I have talked to some that come over in the D.C. area, and they would tell me how the run-ins that they have had with Mexicans out there in California to the point where they can't even walk the street at night. It's dangerous for them to walk the street. They say California is losing a whole lot of black population out of the L.A. area, moving to the south, into the East Coast, away from the migration of Mexicans, because it's almost like it's a war going on between the blacks and the Mexicans now. And the gentleman was telling me that a lot of white supremacist groups are coming along with the Mexican groups out there against black folks, to the point where they can't get jobs. They say if you get a McDonald's job in California, I mean, they say that's some kind of success, because they're not doing any hiring. Detroit is the same way. It's like a ghost town. I was up in that area probably about 6 months ago, and Detroit looks like a ghost town. It's a predominantly black city, but you still have the Mexican, the Korean restaurants there with their fiberglass windows. But like you say, Dr. Anderson, there's no jobs, they lost industry. It's like a pure ghost town. I'm just asking this question: why are so many blacks migrating back to the South?
Well, let me tell you.
Hold on, Doc. I'll let you respond on the other side, because we're coming up on a break.
Okay.
Okay,
Carl. Love you, man.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for your call. Folks, you too can join the conversation for Dr. Claude Anderson. 800-450-7876 is the number to call. Speak to him. And, of course, you can hit me up on Facebook or Twitter at carlnelsonshow.com. And you can like us over there as well on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Again, that number for Dr. Anderson is 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls in about 2.5 minutes.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
And thank you for staying with us and our guest, Dr. Claude Anderson. Dick Gregory's going to join us before the end of the week, so keep listening right here on 1450 WOL. Dr. Anderson, you want to respond to Anthony's questions?
What was the question? I don't remember. What was his question? Can you recall?
No, I can't recall. Maybe Lawrence can help us. I know Lawrence has a question himself on line one. Lawrence is joining us from Arlington, Texas. Lawrence?
Thank you, Carl. Greetings, Dr. Anderson.
Greetings, sir. How are you doing today?
My brother, hey, this black man, when I listen to you and other brothers, y'all revitalize me to make me still feel that the struggle is worse.
Hang on a second, Lawrence, because I think we got this question. Get on that microphone. What was the question? Kiana.
Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Hello?
She talked about blacks moving to Atlanta.
Oh, you mean while they're migrating out?
Right.
Well, they're migrating out, but, and
he mentioned L.A., and he mentioned some other cities, from the urban areas.
Because they're being dominated out of existence. That's why, under this public policy of benign neglect, it has morphed over the last 50 years since the 1960s, and now it's turned out to be not benign neglect towards black to make them invisible. It has morphed into hateful indifference towards black folk. You go into cities like Detroit that he's mentioning. Detroit was a 92% black city. In less than 10 years, the Arabs now own 90% of all the businesses in the city, and the rest are owned by the rest are owned by other groups. Koreans own almost 84%. Get 84 cents out of every dollar that blacks spend for black hair care, nail shops, and everything else. And East Indians own all the Dunkin' Donuts and the cheap hotels and the cleaners. Blacks own nothing in that city. And the same thing is happening like down in Miami. Your civil rights leaders need to be more outspoken. When Hispanics came into, they've taken over California, Los Angeles, but they're doing the same thing. They did the same thing in Miami. They came into the country as Cubans. The first thing they did, they went downtown and took over downtown. And told people that since black folk don't speak Spanish, that they should not be working in the stores. They took over the stores. Then they went into the government. And over in the hotels, the blacks used to dominate in the jobs on the hotels, even the cleaning ladies. The cleaning ladies came to me in the 1970s crying, saying, Dr. Anderson, I've been working these hotels now all my life. Now I don't have a job, and all my friends, we've been fired. I said, why don't you go tell the civil rights leaders this? They're the ones down there telling all the Hispanics, come on into the country. Y'all come on. Displace black folk. We don't care. And now when you hear me make these generalizations about the civil rights organization, the black elected officials, the black ministers, keep in mind those are generalizations. There are exceptions. And right here in Washington, D.C., in PG County, I have a number of black elected officials in PG County and in the state of Maryland that are very interested in what I'm talking about. They're very interested that we do owe it. Not only should we be looking out for black folk, we got a responsibility to look out for black folk. And so they're trying. Maxine Waters is one of the few blacks in the entire Congressional Black Caucus out of 42 that will go out and try to fight for enforcement of the mandated treaties that give black folk benefits in this country. So what if black folk are moving to these urban areas to get out from underneath the control of all these other groups that are taking over under social integration and dominating blacks and displacing them in everything. They're taking over affirmative action programs, the school systems, the jobs. Go look at the hotels. Go look at the restaurants. Go look at the working in construction. They're not blacks. And so, yes, that's why they're moving out of those cities. They're moving and they're migrating to any place they can find a sanctuary.
All right. Thanks, Doc, and thanks, Kiana. Lawrence, thank you also for letting us use up some of your time. But you have a question for Doc Anderson?
Yeah, Dr. Anderson, just to reiterate what you said, I lived in Atlanta for over a decade, and everything you said is factually correct. And anybody who cares can go back there and look at everything you said, and it's spot on. Everything you said. And here's the question right here. You see, I get it. There's some brothers and sisters out here who get it. But my question to you basically is this. What do we do about the last bastion of black economic power, and that is the blue-collar unionized blacks in the UAW and all these, because I'm active in UAW politics, my wife and me down here in Texas. And here's the question, Dr. Anderson. I was persona non grata inside the UAW, my wife and me. Now, here's the catch. I was persona non grata with the elected officials, but with the rank and file, they're coming to me and my wife in droves. Lawrence, your wife, you and your wife, help us, help us. And I'm out here on the front lines fighting, and now down here in Texas, at this plant in Arlington, Texas, run by blacks, black president, black financial secretary, black chairman of the shop committee, and these blacks didn't want to have nothing to do with my wife and me, and now, Dr. Anderson, now at this late date, when their jobs are on the line, they're about to be thrown out of office, voted out by whites and other blacks. And Dr. Anderson, here's the question. What do brothers like me do? We on the front lines fighting the good fight, and I'm asking for nothing for myself. I tell brothers and sisters, I help you, you help somebody else. That's all I want you to do. Dr. Anderson, what do we do when the forces that are arrayed against me and my wife, they're militant, they're this, they're that? You know, Dr. Anderson, what do brothers and sisters like me do? Because I'm telling you, Dr. Anderson, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm ready to say, let these blacks sink, let them go to hell in a handbasket. You know, what do I do? Just give me some feedback, brother, because you know what? When I'm in the struggle, I'm out here by myself. These crackers are bringing guns and everything else to the table, and I'm fine with that because I got that too, you know? My training as a black Christian nationalist out of Detroit, everything you said about Detroit, factually accurate. I'm from Flint, Michigan. I did all my military training and education in Detroit. I know exactly what you're saying, everything you're saying. But how can I relate to these blacks who are out of Detroit, Solidarity House, the bastion of the UAW? These blacks in Detroit, they can't stand me because I say to the blue-collar workers what you were saying to all of us on the radio. What do I do? Do I keep the fight or just step aside and let what's going to happen to these blacks? Because Mr. Charlie ain't bothering me. I've been told by the blacks.
Lawrence, let's give him a chance to respond. We're coming up on a break, and I know Doc wants to respond. Thanks for your call, Lawrence.
Lawrence, first of all, let me say then I appreciate what your feelings and your consciousness, and don't you ever change. The first thing I would tell you is step aside and let some of them go past. Because the reason a lot of these upper class blacks and the black overclass are acting the way they are is because people like you are protecting them. You're keeping the racists away from them. And if you were to step aside and let some of the racists go straight at them, then most of them would change their mind. All these black athletes and black entertainers don't care about black folk and the black civil. Let the racists get to them. And they start putting some pain on them, then they'll change. The second thing is don't try to save all the blacks. You can't save all blacks. Some of these blacks got to go and get out of here. And because if you mess around with them too long trying to save all of them, they'll mess around and convince you to think like they think. And they go and you'll go be committing suicide right along with them. Leave them alone. Just get you a small few, just like Noah and Noah's day. Get you a few and put on the ark. And the last thing is that in terms of what you need to be doing is keep in touch with us through the Harvest Institute. Go to our Harvest Institute website, www.harvestinstitute.org. Because right now we're planning a major convention either last this year or the first of next year, where we anticipate bringing almost 40,000 blacks into a major city they're designating soon. And those 40,000 are going to have workshops and training and teaching them how to be competitive people, not hate people, but learn how to compete economically in a capitalist society, learn how to play the game and win. And they have to understand that we live in a race-based society. Racism is a team sport. And it's a team sport. You either play to win or you lose by default. You play as a team. And most of you blacks you're talking about don't want to be a team member. They don't want to play. They don't want to come out and practice as a team. They don't want to catch the ball. They catch the ball and want to run the wrong way. And then they tackle their own men or throw them down or steal the ball and take it home. They'll do anything to hurt their own people. Leave those alone and stay with your own people and get you a small group and begin to work to do something conscientiously. Don't try to get them all. And don't you bow your head because some of them will throw bricks at you. That's okay. And just let them go. And we're going to do some things in the future, and you just hang tough and stay and make us proud of you as a black man.
Doc, I understand you're working on a new book. Thanks, Lawrence.
Yes, we got 2 new books coming out.
Can you tell us, is it too early to share with us what the topics are going to be in these books?
Well, yeah, because right now it'll give you additional information to help these people be able to compete as a group. And tell them that, as I told you a few seconds ago, that racism is a team sport, and whether they like it or not, all of them that's listening to you right now, they have to understand that whether they like it or not, God has arbitrarily assigned them to a skin-color team. They either play as a team or they lose. God sent them here black. Their mother and daddy brought them here black. They are black, so don't be afraid of being black. But under no circumstance you back to hating anybody else or hating on them. What the Hispanics, the Arabs, and the Asians or whites are doing, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're taking care of their own people. I don't fault them for that. That's what they're supposed to do. But I'm not one of these blacks that go around and hating people because they're getting ahead of me. What I fault are those black folk who are sitting down and pulling other blacks down and holding other black folk back and getting elected to public office and swearing an oath that they are there to protect and serve the people who put them in office, and they won't go one step to help those blacks who vote them into office. None of them, nobody practice quid pro quo in politics for black folk. Politics is based on the premise that if I put you in office, you owe me. And you can put all the blacks you want in office, and none of them are going to do anything to help black folk. But here in D.C., as I said, guys like Rudy Kane, for instance, in the state legislature in Maryland, always fight for black folk. I got some blacks over in P.G. County, always trying to help. They're willing to help black folk. Maxine Waters, as I said, will come to the Congress anytime to help black folk for the Congressional Black Caucus. Most of the black elected officials aren't going to do a darn thing for black folk. They're just sitting there vegetating.
All right, we're going to come up on break. When we come back, I want you to tell us about, because I know some of the churches out there have been also helping the Harvest Institute, which is the black think tank, by the way, folks. That's the one that's the only think tank for black folks, and it's run by Dr. Anderson's Powernomics Group. Number to call to speak to Dr. Anderson, 800-450-7876. When we come back, tell us about some of the churches who are really helping the Harvest Institute. We'll take your calls for Dr. Anderson in about 2.5.
This podcast was recorded by bkrpodcast.com.
And thank you for staying with us and our guest, Dr. Claude Anderson from Powernomics Corporation. Dr. Anderson, before the break I was asking you about churches, because I know some certain churches help the Harvest Institute, and a caller wanted to know about the AME Church. They wanted to know if the AME Church was also part of that, the churches and pastors that support you.
Well, first of all, let me start with the biggest. One of the biggest supporters we have is Crenshaw Baptist Church in L.A., Dr. Fred Price. He has never missed a month, in 15 or 16 years, send us money every month. And he's one of our biggest supporters, and they will fight like the devil to do something for black folk across this land. I'm very proud of him. That's Dr. Fred Price at Crenshaw Baptist Church in L.A. We got Florida Avenue Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., a very strong supporter that helps us every month in one way or another to be able to make ends meet. And we got New Baptist Church down in Memphis, Tennessee, with Kenneth Whalen. We got Pastor Freddie Haynes in Dallas, Texas, and we got Zoe churches also in L.A. So we got a number of churches, and I can't remember all the names. I can't think of one big church in Shreveport, Louisiana, that always helps us. So, but we got approximately 65,000 black churches in the United States and 122,000 black ministers, and out of that we got maybe about 10 that on a regular basis try to help us help black folk. The rest of them, they take that money and put it in a bank and can't even get a loan, and so they pull out more money. The black churches pull out 5 times more money out of black folks' pockets than all the black businesses put together. But the money never goes directly back into the black community to do very much in terms of creating jobs, businesses, products, and services and goods for black folks.
All right, 800-450-7876. Go to line 1. Fahim's in Atlanta. Fahim, you're on with Dr. Claude Anderson.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, sir.
Hey, Dr. Claude, you give me reason to keep hoping. My question is, well, first I'll make a statement. Looking at Detroit, the Caucasian business have abandoned it. The black businesses have been bankrupt. The city's been bankrupt. But I see it as an opportunity for us as a people to get organized ourselves and go there and buy property and establish ourselves in communities like you were talking about. I'd like you to speak on that and see if that's a viable ideal to you. Thank you.
First of all, I tried I tried that, and it didn't work in Detroit, Michigan, for a very simple reason. Is that the what's called the gang of nine in the city didn't want that to happen because they were in the process of recapturing that city. And most of these urban cities they didn't run down because of black leadership. They were run down by the fact that that whites moved and relocated all the resources out of the city and stripped them. They used field stripped everything out of those cities. They moved the wealth, the power, the businesses, the industries, the factory, the middle class, the learning class to the suburbs. And these black. Huh?
Very deliberate.
Deliberately. And so all they left was the black class there, and blacks who ran for political office. But as I said to you earlier, politics is controlled by who has the money and the resources. So around Detroit, the money was outside the city, and the Gang of Nine were people like the owners of the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit News, Renaissance Detroit, the TV stations, and a lot of other people there. I don't want to give a name. They control that city. They want the city back. They want to gentrify the city. And the first thing they did was to try to take over, privatize everything in that city. Anything in these major black cities that belongs to the public, to a black public, they're going to privatize it. Like Detroit, Michigan, they're going to take over the Ambassador Bridge to Canada. They're going to take over the tunnel to Detroit to Canada. They're going to take over the golf course, the zoo. They're going to take over the museums, the art institute. They're going to take over the city airport. They're going to privatize them into the hands of whites. And once they privatize it, you don't have a resource base anymore. And then they're going to gentrify it, bring in all these other groups over you. So that process has been going on all over the country. It's going to happen in all these major cities. That's going to happen in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Gary, Indiana, Chicago, St. Louis, Little Rock, Birmingham, Atlanta, Georgia, Los Angeles. They're going to take them over for black folks. And
yes, it's being done right now before our eyes in Atlanta. And I think our governor, our mayor here, is a Dino, Democrat in name only, because he seems to be going along with it. In fact, he even takes up for this governor that kept all of the money that the president has supplied for the Obamacare from the people.
Well, yeah, but see, and what is the black community doing? You put them in office, you're paying the taxes for them, you're supporting them, and why don't you excommunicate them out of the race and sort of hold them accountable?
Yeah. That's what some are attempting to do. That there's a few brothers. There's one brother that has a radio station here. He organizes and he attempts to do that. And many of the black politicians that attempted to do that, they got them caught up in scandals. There was two brothers. I forget their names right now, but they were involved in trying to get an investigation open into this city where the last black man and his wife and his child was hung at. Now all of a sudden, both of them are being prosecuted for various charges. Everybody that comes up against these guys wind up in the judicial system.
Right. Well, you're right. But they can't do that unless they control the economy. If they control the economy, they can do it. We had a black that was one of our primary people for promoting the fulfillment and mandating of the 1866 Indian Treaty, and he lost his little bar license. His wife was a judge. She lost her judgeship. That goes on, but you got to stand firm and say we're not going to go that way anymore. Whenever black folks start standing up and don't hate anybody and be against them, I just say no. It's certain we're just not going to do anymore. We're not going to sambo. We're not going to Uncle Tom. We're not going to scratch our head when we don't itch. We're just not going to do it. And start supplying, be self-sufficient. If you're self-sufficient, it doesn't make any difference. if you're self-sufficient, where you can feed yourself, clothe yourself, provide your own jobs, your own tax base, and control and run your own schools and your own business in your own neighborhood, be just like the Chinatowns, the Korea towns, the Japan towns, the Arab towns, and the Mexican towns, the little Cubas, the little Havanas, the Greek towns, the little Italys, the Polish towns. But see, you can't do it if you integrate. If you integrate, you can't do anything. You're through in this country. If you integrate, you're through.
Right. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. God bless.
That begs a question, because something in our DNA why we dislike, we've been programmed to dislike each other. We don't like to live beside each other. We go out to the PG and we leave D.C. and now the folks are coming back into D.C. and we can't get back into the city. What's going on here?
Oh, because we dislike each other because we know each other. Because they look at each other and say, "You don't hold or control anything. You don't have any wealth and power and clout. You can't do anything for me. Nor can you do anything against me. So why should I respect, appreciate, and want to be associated with you?" It's a very simple answer to that one. Because see, all the money, the wealth, and power and privileges are associated with those who basically have white skin, and so naturally, it's natural for blacks to gravitate to that. That's a normal phenomenon. They got all the power and the wealth, the power and the control, the privileges, positions, and all levels of government and the media. You gravitate to where it is. And people.
Interrupt me for a second, Doc. But does that same dynamic play out in other other ethnicities as well?
Yeah, to a large degree, but they got a difference. They got an advantage on you. First of all, their advantage is they're classified as whites in the country. See, the only two colored issues you got in this country is black and white. All these other people are classified as whites. And the Hispanics were always classified as whites. Arabs and Asians have mixed together in about the last 20 years, where they're not classified as Asians, so they're classified as whites, and some of the Asians just on probation to be white. American Indians, all the way back to the 1700s, were identified by Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, saying that American Indians they're the cousin of white folk. That's why we can accept them. We're bragging about how much Indian blood we got in them. We don't mind affiliating with them. They're just savages. We can educate them and get along with them. The issue has always been black and white. And people keep talking about people of color. There ain't no people of color. Whites got color. But they get deluded and think that somehow somebody wants to affiliate with them. Nobody's going to affiliate with you if you have no power, no resource, no privileges, no status, no culture, and no responsible behavior. And all these blacks that act up and do wild things, they're just supporting the demise of black folk.
All right, we're running out of time, but I'm going to tell folks that Dick Gregory's going to be here by the end of the week. Also, Dr. Kenneth Whalen, he's got a new book, Hip Hop is Not Our Enemy, and Dr. Kenneth Whalen, of course, Kirk Whalen's brother. We're going to talk about music as well. Doc,
Kenneth Whalen is a good guy, so make sure you push him pretty hard. He's one of these guys that have been fighting hard down in Memphis, Tennessee for black folk. Very hard fighter, and he's a good friend of mine, so you take good care of him. And again, tell the people to read those books. Get my books, go to the website and get those books and read them. And they can call the Harvard Institute. Huh?
Tell us again the title of the books so folks will know, and also how can they get them.
Okay. Black Labor, White Wealth they did a historical tracking across 1,400 years to show you every technique, strategy, law, custom, or ethics that was used to put black folks to the bottom of a barrel, to where they own and control absolutely nothing of any significance in this country. That was the whole process of slavery and Jim Crow segregation, to make sure that everything was maldistributed away from them into other people's hands. That's called Black Labor, White Wealth. And that's a classic book that Ebony and Jet Magazine calls the second Bible for black folk in this country and around the world. Now, Powernomics picks up where that left off. It's called Powernomics, the National Plan to strengthen and empower black folk economically in the country. That book picks up and carries you through 8 chapters to tell you everything you should do, lay it out as a roadmap for you and how you go about doing it. And the other 2 books are called Dirty Little Secrets 1 and Dirty Little Secrets 2. Those 2 books give you hundreds of facts, tell you stories, episodes, tell you exactly why black folk are special people, that absolutely nothing is happening.
We're running out of time, so quickly give us the phone number.
The phone number is 301-564-6075. Again, the Powernomics Corporation is 301-564-6075, or go to www.powernomics.com and get their power back. You get all 4 books for $70, and